7:20 a.m. and 101.5 FM in Las Vegas. Our show is produced by Green Alliance and sponsored by NV Energy. And we're on Facebook Live, so send us your questions. And if you would like to call in with questions, our number is 702-257-5396. That's 257 KDWN. This building that we're talking about today with Stowe and Michael is a LEED certified building. Tell us about the LEED certification on the building.
So we are in the final stages of the LEED certification on the project, and we're going to be somewhere between silver and gold certification when it's all said and done. And we hope to have that here this fall.
So a little bit about what goes into getting a building LEED certified, and how about the application for that certification?
So what goes into it is you have to start at the very beginning. You have to have a visionary dean and a visionary university like we have in Stowe and UNLV, and the support of the State Public Works Division. And so from the very beginning, before we even draw a line, we set out goals. And it's important that we set those goals so everyone's on board. The design team, including all the engineers, the client, the contractor, and we establish those goals so we know the path that we're headed down. And we go through all the LEED criteria, and we like to identify the low-hanging fruit, the free points, the things you should just do because it's good design practice. And we find that if you just do those things, you get a lot of those points. And then we start to identify the things that are really going to improve the use of the building, things like daylighting, lighting systems that we talked about earlier, and identify all the building systems and establish reasonable goals. We don't want to establish goals that aren't going to have a payback. We don't want to establish goals that are inappropriate for the building's location, for the site. We want to establish the correct goals. So it's not always feasible to achieve the highest number of points only because it doesn't make sense. And you want to do what's appropriate, and we always focus on doing that. And then to answer the question about the process, there's a whole series of documentation that you put together, applications show that you are complying with their requirements, and that extends not just during design but all the way through construction and after.
So for our listeners, that's the United States Green Building Council,
Yes.
Leadership in Energy Engineering Design, just for the newer listeners. And how many buildings around have you worked on that are LEED certified?
I think offhand I'd say there's about 8 of them that we have done that are.
And you're considered a sustainable architectural firm.
We are.
And what makes your firm sustainable?
Well, I think from our inception, we've always tried to do what's right for this climate, and we've always designed buildings that do focus on the desert, try to fit within their context, choose the appropriate materials, make the appropriate decisions that are going to make the building perform, and it's just become part of how we design. It's part of our process.
So sustainability starts out as a vision and then becomes a part of a practice, and it's what you do on a daily basis then.
Absolutely.
Before we went to break, we're talking about lighting, and I want to talk a little bit more about lighting and how you utilize LED throughout your facility, inside and out, during the design process. What were you thinking about lighting, and how did you reduce the amount of energy used for lighting?
Well, first and foremost, we have a site that has north-south exposure. So we were able to utilize daylighting to bring that lighting into the building. So virtually all of our offices and classrooms utilize daylighting. Next, we did work closely with the university and the state in selection of fixtures that were LED. And lots of discussions around that, but it allowed us actually to reduce the number of fixtures. For example, normally in an office of 120 square feet to 180 square feet, which we have a lot of, you'd have 2 to 3 fixtures if they were fluorescent. We were able to go with 1 fixture in almost all of those cases. So just there, we reduced the use of materials, and certainly we're able to provide adequate lighting, and those lights are often turned off because of the daylighting. We also were able to use the daylighting to light spaces that did not have a window. For example, we have a series of offices that say have a south or north exposure, and by leaving the top 18 inches or so of each of those offices a full length of glass, we were able to borrow that daylight from the exterior across the offices into the hallways and reduce the number of fixtures we needed in those hallways. And it actually just makes for a much more pleasant environment to come down those hallways. We also bring light in those hallways and provide view at important intersections and locations.
Beautiful.
You know, looking at the building, it looks quite open and airy, so letting that light shine in like that's a great idea. Let's talk about using the building in hospitality itself, and you're teaching cooking and what have you. How about your food sources? Are you considering sustainability when you're sourcing your food for your menus?
Yeah, very much so. So on our ground floor, we have this beautiful coffee shop that is actually run by our students. And so for the students, they were very concerned that all the product be locally sourced. They were very concerned about sustainability. And so all the cupware that we use is all recycled. They don't give any plastic straws.
Love it.
It's all, if there are any straws, it's all paper. And they were very concerned about the whole recyclability of everything. At the university, as everybody probably knows, we have some community gardens. And part of that community garden belongs to the Hospitality College. And so Chef Mark Sandoval, who's one of our chefs and runs our hospitality catering division, he actually grows things in that garden, and then he uses that in the classrooms with teaching the kids, mostly with different kinds of spices and things like that. So we're really focused on that whole area, and in our cooking classes, we're always teaching that side of the business.
As we like to talk about food, making a menu and then finding the food is backwards. So finding the food and then developing a menu around local sources of food is a great idea. You're utilizing that with on-campus gardens, of course. But
yeah, very much so. And then with Chef Mark, anytime we're doing a specific function, we're bringing that thinking into the students right away. Because again, we're not a culinary program, but you can't understand hospitality without some kind of food and some kind of beverage program. And so what we try to do, actually not try, but what we do is we want students to have a realistic expectation of what's going to happen when they enter the industry. And as you know, Las Vegas is probably one of the most sustainable cities in the country in terms of all their resorts, because if you're booking a meeting or an event, the meeting planners want to know what's your sustainability plan. So when our students graduate, they're going to be confronted with that in industry. So let's start at the beginning of their curriculum and teach them that whole process of how you look for sustainability, how you look for locally sourced food, what are the things you can do in terms of recycling, how do you minimize waste. All of that is becoming really part of our culture, because that's the culture that they're going to find when they enter our industry.
when I touched on one of my other favorite topics, which is waste, how do you deal with waste?
So frankly, I'm not as familiar with what Chef Mark has done. I think the biggest thing that I know that Chef Mark focuses on is how do we reduce the waste by making sure that we're purchasing the right amount that's needed. How do we make sure that in all our different cooking classes that we're all coordinated, so we're not all going out and buying the same thing, so there's a lot of leftover waste. And then we try to, where possible, to develop menu items that if we don't have enough people show up, that product can be used in something else on the next day. So it has all to do with planning.
I love that.
To make sure that we're not wasting that way.
It's good. Appreciate that. So we're going to talk more about CSD Architects when we come back and what your firm's all about. We'll be right back to Shades of Green on KDWN.